the pseudomorphosis, if you like, of Aristotle, or do we have something more like the leap? So for instance, in the case of Russia, sometimes it's said a pseudomorphosis occurred whereby Russia took on many of the outward forms of Western European government. Which had sprung out of the 1,000 years of the Holy Roman Empire. Voltaire's script came late. For most of the time there was an empire connected to the Catholic Church. And it did have a certain observable unity. It's as though the Treaty of Westphalia and so on were really, the reason why that really was international law is because they really are talking about something created out of the Holy Roman Empire. And so they're just saying, these are what the sub-entities have the right to do. You could go to war, you could do all kinds of things, as long as you don't conspire against the empire. And then they tried to extend that to the rest of the Europeans in the East, but it somehow, probably because it is a pseudomorph, it doesn't quite work. Now let's look at Aristotle. For the sake of sort of superimposing Aristotle over these questions in the inverted dark moment, let's remember Aristotle saying that the suke is the essence of the body as its morphe. The suke is the morphe of the body. And then we're just looking at Dugin's version of topos, his explication of the difference between topos and the container, the Timaeus container of Plato. The form of the body is then the available body, or the ousia body. So then it's being understood as the available body as a source of kinesis or motion, and the body is understood as a plenum. How do we get to the principle of this body as being, like, where is it that we're able to go back and forth between the pseudomorphosis and the object that actually looks like itself? There's a change in shape, but the essence is still the same. Somehow the underlying Brownian motion, the underlying principle of motion, which actually touches on every part, is still the same, or even can disregard the parts somehow. it just names, this is a tree, for instance. Just it's a tree. We don't need to know necessarily that a tree can be divided into the hen and top ponta type of problem. One in many type of problem. The tree has a singular, as long as it's alive, it has this morphe, or one source of its motion. The logos, which is supposed to be the unity of all such things, is thought classically as the mind of God. But what is the content of the mind of God here? The object, so for instance, I'm using generically the word object or thing. Maybe thing is better, maybe object is better, both have problems. Sheehan uses object. But it always worries me because of the stupidity of people that don't explain to themselves what their terms mean, and or let's put another way, who are concerned with whether their way of using language makes any sense. But they just take for granted, oh, it's objective. What does that mean? Nonplussed. No answer. Can't believe you asked. Now let's see. So let's call them all the things. Tree, or Russia, or what's our other example here that we're just sort of on? Well, let's just put it that way, tree or Russia. Either way, there's a center of motion. There's a thing is thought as a morphe, as a form. The forms are coming forward in the random stream of things, according to Nietzsche. There's no, God is dead. God is tot. God is tot. So this is in the 35 metaphysics essay. It seems to me, I think Heidegger has accepted this version of God as tot, okay? So there's no, according to Nietzsche, sort of, in George Lucas terms, force, craft, that binds all things, that allows the Jedi Knight to construct lightsabers that can cut through anything. It allows Yoda to bring the spaceship out of the bog, out of the billabong. But in this case, what are we talking about? We're actually talking about the principle of identity. So it's a rhetoric of the rhetoric of identity in the light of this recent Dugan characteristic of some of these matters. Is one on rhetoric as a fundamental power. I mean, this is an old theme, and Heidegger and Strauss have also devoted a lot of work to this. Through speech, we cut up the three types of so-called rhetoric. The one, forensic, or looking at things that have already happened, like a crime scene. The two, what's it called, didactic rhetoric? The second one, the rhetoric that praises and blames. I forget how that should be called. That corresponds to the peons and the dithyrambs. So that's very interesting. In the center, the Dionysian, to the Greek religion. So it's interesting that I'm going kind of on a little zigzag path here, but try to just superimpose everything together. In Jane Harrison's work on Greek religion, she makes this striking remark that religion is already almost mechanical in Homer. What does she mean by that? She means that while Homer is taken as the origin and the freshness of literature by the scholars still in her day, of all the Greek literature, Homer himself, this most fresh source, Iliad, Odyssey, so-called Homeric odes and so on, has come sort of late and just picked up the canned version of the Greek religion and just put it into his song, into his rhapsodes have put it into the song. I mean, I know there's this question of was there really a Homer, or should we attribute the writing to the thousands and thousands of rhapsodes or whatever in their interactions with the people they sung to? I think both. But in any case, you have this notion that Homer himself is in the record not given us what the Greek archaic religions were really about. The Pharmakos ritual, for instance. Pharmakos ritual is a little bit like that sort of terrifying short story that you're supposed to read when you're sort of in grade school or something, or maybe in the beginning of high school in America, about it's called The Lottery, where they stone some people to death. It's supposed to refresh things for the community, and yet the real connection to these undergirdings, which can't be called religion, they're called sometimes myth and ritual. They're called by other names. In Plato, there's the division between piety and the holy, but there's no one notion of religion, and neither are they really talking about religion. In a way, they're talking about something like the things you see in the middle of the in the medians of streets in India, where there's shrines to deities, and then the deities are attributed certain characteristics and certain things they like and don't like. I mean, that's kind of what they're talking about in the Euthyphro, Plato's Euthyphro. Euthyphro is supposed to be an expert on all these various daimon or ghosts and what they're into. Theoi, I guess, is a proper way to say that, not ghosts so much. So you have a unity, a binding of all things in the mind of God through the principle of unity itself as the principle of identity. Is this so? In a way, Nietzsche's denying this as this whole, just as except that he's saying, in the place of what connects everything together, he's going to do as a construct, will Zermacht, his will to will. You have to read that more closely as we go on in Heidegger's version of Nietzsche, because Heidegger sort of gives Nietzsche more of a presentation as a metaphysics than Nietzsche gives himself in a certain sense. But as a metaphysics that doesn't regard itself as knowledge, but it still does metaphysics. It still makes this presentation of will to power as the highest unity of all things, and as I suppose the analogous clarity on what this highest unity is the Palladium, is the account of the agathos of the good, because the good for the Greeks is the idea that clarifies or explicates what being is, whereas for Nietzsche, the will to power is what does that, and therefore it speaks of all Anwesen or availability. And Heidegger calls this is the ontotheology.